All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Joe Biden is now the presumptive Democratic frontrunner. He's leading the polls in a head-to-head matchup with Bernie Sanders and giving the entire political establishment whiplash at his ascent. You saw Crystal and I grapple with some of this yesterday, but it's important that we once again think about what exactly it would mean to average Americans that Joe Biden become president. Biden's campaign is fundamentally backwards because that is not the actual purpose of his effort. It's not designed to be a forward-thinking message. It does not think, as Andrew Yang would often say, to the symptoms of a country so fed up it is willing to vote for Donald Trump. Instead, it's propelled forward by a dying Democratic establishment and the primal scream of elites who lost their power in 2016 and stood to lose it again under Sanders and continued with Trump. All the elites of this country want is to return to the year 2013. Biden is very happy to oblige. 2013 was when Barack Obama considered Google and Facebook the apex of American economic achievement. It's the year after his re-election when his administration began in earnest to once again try and sell out American workers by negotiating TPP. It was the year that he decided to use his pen and his phone to illegally legalize millions of illegal immigrants. And it was the year that ISIS rose back up in Iraq and Afghanistan, revealing just how much that they failed to wrap up our foreign misadventures abroad. In each case, the everyday member of the working class paid the price for all of these decisions. Every single decision, every single person needs to ask the question, can you afford to return to the year 2013? Biden was front and center for every single policy failure under Barack Obama. And worse, he has spent his entire career trying to screw working class Americans. Why did people who fared so badly in 2008, why do students continue today to live under crippling student debt? Because Joe Biden led the 2005 effort to strip Americans of bankruptcy protections away at the behest of credit card companies, which led him, in the media at the time, to brand him the senator from MBNA. That was relatively late into his effort screwing everyday Americans. In 1993, in a speech on the Senate floor before voting for NAFTA, Biden said, "With our vote for NAFTA, we take the first step toward creating more jobs in an expanding world market." Before that, he said he promised the car manufacturer Chrysler would expect to sell more cars to Mexico made in his very own Delaware home state factory. Turns out that factory closed in 2007, the same year he publicly said NAFTA created more jobs than it lost. On the issue of China, it's even worse. Biden supported normalizing trade relations with China in 2000, which, along with joining the World Trade Organization, put them on the path to economic destruction of our middle class today. Biden said at the time that, quote, "this growing prosperity for the Chinese people in turn has put China on a path toward ever greater political and economic freedom." Biden fell for the neoliberal dream that normalizing trade relations with China, making them richer, would make them more democratic. As late 2011, Biden said that he held his original belief that a rising China is a positive development, not only for China, but for America and the world writ large. That puts his original 2020 campaign gaffe about how China is not a threat to the U.S. in pretty clear perspective. Let's take a listen.
Look at who we are. I've met virtually every major world leader in my role as vice president and as foreign relations chairman over the last 30 years. And that's not hyperbole. Virtually every one. I don't know a single solitary one who would not change places with the problems the President of the United States has versus the problems they have. China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the West. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system.
Come on, man. The election of Donald Trump in 2016 should have taught people on the right and the left a lesson. On the right, we learned to hear our voters, try to protect our workers. He and his Obama world cretins have not learned anything. Notice, I haven't even gotten to the fact that his son is a degenerate who traded off of his famous father's name for decades, rode the trains a lot, so he got to sit on the Amtrak board of directors. He apparently was an oil and gas expert, so he sat on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. And of course, he's a famed venture capitalist, which is why the Chinese government gave his company a sweetheart $1 billion financing deal while his father was the vice president in the year 2012. I can go on and on. I just wanted to give you all an update so that you knew Hunter was okay. He has now decided to act as a starving artist in a multi-million-dollar mansion. It's really inspiring. And then, of course, I'll finish with this. 4 years of Biden would mean electing a person in clear decline. I'll let him speak for himself.
Why attack Sanders?
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take the 19 steps. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were. Make sure make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. I'm beginning to see why your wife left you. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up. He said, you walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
2016 was a transition year from neoliberalism of the 1980s. In our history, we've always capped the end of an era with a one-term president who was a complete failure. John Quincy Adams, James Buchanan, Herbert Hoover, Jimmy Carter, and if we're not careful, Joseph R. Biden. So that's what I'm looking at, Crystal, in particular, is that I think that people in a rush to consolidate in the Democratic establishment, to stop Sanders in order to try and beat Trump and end this, is they're overlooking over how much the everyday Americans suffered, really, under the Obama administration. And, look, it's not just them. The 30 years of policies that preceded him. But he and Biden were put into the White House in order to put a stop to that. And all they did was accelerate it by throwing a few, woke tokenisms to people and not really actually addressing the structural problems. And Biden, all of the people around him, this is, like I said, it's a gasp of trying to get back into power.
Yeah.
So that Larry Summers and all these other people can come and run the U.S. economy again. And there's a reason that Donald Trump is in office. There's a reason that he will continue. I think he would probably beat Joe Biden like a drum, as he likes to say, is because it's exactly like 2016 all over again. They haven't learned anything on NAFTA, on trade, on China, Social Security, as you say. He doesn't even have the moral authority in order to attack Trump from the left because he essentially agrees with him on many of these neoliberal policies.
I mean, the fact that the last best hope of the dying Democratic establishment is that man kind of says it all.
Yeah.
And why? I mean, to your point, why do you end up in this place? First of all, I think there's a failure of imagination on the Democrats' part to imagine that things could be worse than Donald Trump, right? But let me tell you, if you allow these trends to continue unabated, if you fail to respond to the deep angst and core rot of America by actually improving lives and creating meaning for people again in this country, you will find out how much worse things can be than Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, okay? You're going to find that out. But why can they put their hopes in an empty vessel like Joe Biden? It's because they didn't learn anything from 2016. What did they do? They never stopped to say, what did we do that would lead to a Donald Trump, right? Where did we go wrong? What is it about this system that we contributed to that would lead this working class base that used to be with us to switch sides and go with the party of the rich and this clownish, buffoonish guy? What did we do? They never did that. Instead, it was Russia, or it was Comey, or it was
Ukraine
sexism.
yeah,
now, Ukraine, all these things. And so there was an inability. And part of that is because doing that self-reflection would have implicated them.
Yes.
It would have implicated their whole way of doing business, the whole power structure that's set up, the gig flow, all of that would be implicated, and they can't afford to do that self-searching. It's also why they can't make a coherent case against Donald Trump that would actually land with the American people about his broken promises to the working class, about Social Security, which many of them have lined up to try to work with Republicans to cut. They can't do that because that would implicate them as well.
And this is why I try here to try and fight for a better left, too, is because when you have a real debate, if the left was beating the Trump administration down on manufacturing unemployment, especially in the Midwestern states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the Trump administration would care a whole lot more about that.
Right.
But because there's no actual policy arguments. It's all Russia. He's an uncouth man. Our children are watching. This is terrible. Norms, my God. I always think about that when they interviewed those black voters in Milwaukee who stayed home in 2016.
Right.
And they didn't care that Trump, they were like, yeah, I don't care.
They had no regrets.
It's, Chris Arnott, when he was on the show, he wrote his book Dignity, which I recommend everybody buy.
Yeah,
and he talks about non-voters. And he talks about why do these non-voters, the largest group of voters in this country are non-voters. Why don't they vote? Because they don't believe the political system will ever work for them. Think about the deep level of cynicism to pervade your life in order to go about and have no faith whatsoever in your elected leaders. And that happened in just a 30-year period. And how did Barack Obama and Joe Biden and all these other people who were part of this system, Anita Dunn and all these other people that surround him and would just push the same policies, how do they reckon with that? How do they reckon with those people? They spit on them. They look down at them for staying at home and electing this terrible person who offends them when they don't understand that they never did anything to lift those people out of their situations. And, that's why I think they're going to lose.
It's always been the excuse, among the excuses, the other one is just a sheer contempt for voters, right? They're racist, they're sexist, they're ill-informed, they vote against their interests, etc. And look, bigotry is real. Like, that is a real sentiment that is inflamed in times of, economic frustration. There's no doubt about that. But that lets them off the hook. That lets them off the hook. It was the same thing with Russiagate, right? Like, why don't these stupid voters care about this thing that is so important?
Let's throw Mueller in front of a camera and see how that works.
Right, and we need to dramatize it. If we put him in front of the camera, once the Mueller report, then these stupid voters will finally understand why this is so important. They never stop for a second to think, no, there's a good reason. Voters have a lot more things on their mind, and you aren't making any kind of an effective case, either against Trump or for yourself, on that matter. And now, here we are, all set to run Hillary Clinton 2.0, again, with a less competent, less intelligent, less competent, less capable candidate against a much stronger Donald Trump. So there you go.
All right, Crystal, I'm looking forward to what's on your radar. That's next.